It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. Our sponsor today is Morning Ag Clips. Morning Ag Clips is America's #1 daily ag news service, designed to be a quick and easy read. It will help you stay up to date on the important headlines in both local and national agriculture every business morning. You can go to their website at www.morningagclips.com to sign up or peruse the headlines. Connect with them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Your Morning Ag Clips will help to keep you in the know. Welcome to the North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today is Director of Government Affairs and Market Regulatory Policy for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. He's been a regular lately on Ag Spotlight, and today we're going to be talking about the House passing 2 NCBA-backed bills on market transparency. I'd like to welcome back Tanner Beymer. Welcome, and thanks so much for being here.
You bet, Chrissy. Always good to be back.
Yeah. So first of all, can you tell me a bit of background about the 2 bills?
Yeah, so the first bill was brought by House Agriculture Committee Chairman David Scott, and that is to extend the authority for livestock mandatory reporting through to September 30th of 2022. LMR is a very essential market transparency program that is run by USDA, and cattle producers use the information that comes from that program to make marketing decisions, better inform business decisions, and in some cases to set the base prices for fed cattle transactions. So that's a very critical program at USDA, and it does require congressional reauthorization every 5 years. The most recent reauthorization effort occurred in September of 2020, which is when the program was originally set to expire. It got a temporary extension to last September through the appropriations process, and it was reauthorized again, but only temporarily via the continuing resolution that's currently funding the government through February 18th of 2022. This legislation, however, gives us a little bit more certainty and extends that deadline out until next fall. So if we have new policy that comes out of our national convention and our meeting where our members will vote on policy that advocates for specific changes to LMR, we have a little bit of time to advocate for those changes with this new September 30th deadline. So we were pleased to see that get over the finish line in the House and now see it go on to the Senate. And then additionally, there was a bill brought by Congressman Dusty Johnson, who's a Republican from South Dakota, and Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas, called the Cattle Contract Library Act. And that's something that our industry has been working on for a pretty substantial amount of time now. And it would establish and maintain a library of all the contracts made available by packers to producers for the purchase of fed cattle. And it would warehouse that library in a searchable format at USDA. Now, that library, of course, would be a little bit more high level than, say, a contract between a packer and a feeder with just the identifying names redacted. It would be subject to aggregation, which is pretty standard with livestock mandatory reporting, and then also would be subject to USDA's rules of confidentiality to prevent any sort of leverage sways back to the packer in the case of, being able to see what they're doing compared to what other people are doing. So it's a great market transparency tool. It'll allow producers to kind of see what options are available to them, what qualities in cattle are being incentivized and are fetching a premium, so that they can, again, take that information and make whatever adjustments they see fit on their individual businesses. So we were glad to see that get over the finish line in the House as well.
Absolutely. And the House voted 418-9 to advance HR 5290 and the Cattle Contract Library Act. The House passed with overwhelmingly 411-13. So were you surprised at the bipartisan support it received?
I really wasn't. These are two legislative proposals that have gotten a lot of support, both on Capitol Hill with lawmakers and out in the industry. It's no secret that when it comes to marketing cattle, there are a lot of different opinions on what the best way to approach some of these bills that we've seen introduced lately. But the cattle contract library is one that virtually everybody can agree upon because it is a useful market transparency tool. And I think one of the reasons you saw it move through the legislative process so quickly was because it had such widespread support from livestock groups that don't always see eye to eye with one another. It moved from being introduced to getting marked up by the House Agriculture Committee on a unanimous voice vote in 48 hours. And I think that's why you saw such magnanimous support for it when it came up for a vote in the House yesterday. And livestock mandatory reporting, I mean, the results speak for themselves. This program has been wildly successful and very popular with producers ever since it was teed up in 2001. And Congress, like I said, every 5 years since then has reauthorized it in some form or fashion because it is such a successful tool. So those vote margins, I think, are really a good indication of what Capitol Hill is doing. They're listening to feedback from stakeholders and they're moving forward with those proposals which have the most support from the affected groups. And hopefully the Senate will take note of that as they start to consider some of these various proposals going into next spring.
That's great. And the current relationship between major meat packers and the producer, it has been tense lately. So do you think these bills will lessen this tension?
By itself, no, because I wouldn't say that these bills are silver bullets. But when we couple them together with some of the other things we're working on, improving and increasing processing capacity, improving price discovery throughout the entire marketplace, those in concert together will, I think, start to swing leverage back to cattle producers. And then also there's just some dynamics that are at play in the market. We're experiencing a herd contraction right now at the same time that there are a lot of small regional independent processors that are adding capacity right now. And I just came from a meeting with Cattle Facts looking at some market forecasts. And I think that particularly at the cow-calf sector, we can expect to see a welcome change from the last several years in terms of break-evens and profitability.
Well, that's good to hear. And you're from a farming background. What are you hearing from back home from those farms?
A lot of those folks are very curious about where we're going next, right? So contract library and livestock mandatory reporting reauthorization are only two proposals out of a vast amount of options on cattle markets. You got this Fisher-Grassley bill, which would, among other things, mandate certain levels of participation in the negotiated market, which is different by region. There's a lot of questions about how that would work. There's a lot of questions about whether or not the Justice Department is going to conclude its investigation into the meat packers to see if there was any anti-competitive behavior in the aftermath of those two most recent black swans, being, of course, the Holcomb fire and COVID-19. I'm from Idaho, which is in the West, very arid, very, very drought stricken. So a lot of the questions I get asked are, drought related in nature. And a lot of that also has to do with kind of where you're seeing some movement of cattle, right? A lot of that herd contraction I was talking about can be attributed to those places where there is a pretty heavy drought. So producers are trying to think outside the box. I spoke to a group in my home state not that long ago where I found out that 30% of the folks in that room, most of whom are cow-calf producers, retain ownership of those cattle beyond just the cow-calf level, which is a much higher figure than I would have anticipated. And I think that speaks to, the availability of regional processing. There's a plant going up in southern Idaho that a lot of these folks are very excited about. And that's one of the reasons I think that's leading that retained ownership to come up. But the other thing that kind of goes along with that is just it's a better way to manage risk and capture some additional leverage and profitability for that sector. So a lot of questions about where we go from here. But I think by and large, at least from the conversations I've been having, there is a renewed sense of optimism that perhaps we haven't had to this degree for the last some odd years.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's next in these processes?
Yeah, so both of these bills that we talked about have to go to the Senate. I do not expect that there will be a lot of movement over there from now to the end of the year. Congress is about to adjourn for recess to observe the holidays. And then once they get back, they've got their plate full trying to fully fund the government. And they have a debt ceiling that they need to vote to raise or not. There's a full list of things that the Senate has to get through. But I believe that the Agriculture Committee will take a serious look at these proposals. And like I said, we would be hopeful that they would focus on those proposals that have very wide support and in pretty much consensus within the industry.
Right. Yeah. And with everything else on their plate, this seems like low-hanging fruit just to get it done, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. The way it moved through the House, the margin that it received when the vote came to call. I think that this is a pretty easy layup, assuming that we're not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Right. Yeah. So what else is NCBA trying to address in government going forward? Are you looking forward to anything? What should we be expecting?
I think that we are concluding what is typically a very busy legislative year. And then as we go into next year, all of the House is in cycle. And next November, we're going to have a midterm election. And I think that that's probably going to result in a lot less time spent in Washington, a lot more time spent out in home districts. You got a third of the Senate that's in re-election as well. And this is a very critical midterm. Currently, the Democratic Party controls all three levers of the legislative and the executive branch. And so I think that that's something that the Republicans are eyeing very hard, and they're going to want to spend as much time as possible back home campaigning. So in terms of cattle market policy, I would expect to see movement on a host of issues once we come back in January after the new year. But once you get past about April or May, Congress starts to get pretty dead because people start to want to spend more time back in their districts.
Definitely. Yeah. It'll be the season of grab your popcorn and and watch what happens in 2022, right? Well, thank you so much for joining me again. Thanks for the analysis. It's always great to stay on top of what's happening in Washington.
You bet. Absolutely. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah. And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want more information, links are provided in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on YouTube and Rumble. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much and have a great day. Thanks so much for listening to today's Ag Spotlight episode, where we put the spotlight on people and companies doing great things for the agricultural industry. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcasting platform, and give us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on YouTube and Rumble to see the video version of Ag Spotlight. Also, head on over to NorthAmericanAg.com to subscribe to our Industry Connect update newsletter. If you're interested in advertising opportunities, email us at connect@NorthAmericanAg.com. Thanks for listening.